The writer of Ecclesiastes says it best: there is a time for everything and a season for every activity under heaven. During these days of Lent, 17 Trinity friends and I are reading A Good Life, Benedict's Guide to Everyday Joy by Robert Benson. We gather each Wednesday morning via Zoom to discuss a chapter. It's a short, little book, but the content is surprisingly complex and difficult. Not difficult to comprehend, but difficult to master. I selected the book because I thought the topic seemed appropriate for a Lenten small group discussion. I did not realize at the time that the topic would resonate so deeply with me. The book is sort of about achieving a work-life balance, but it's way more than that. It's about a longing for God and how that longing relates to how we spend our time and where we exert our energy. The book is an expansion of the Rule of Saint Benedict, a guide that was written to provide order and meaning for monks. The wisdom and insight have implications far beyond the monastic life. Benedict's rule encourages us to really look at our lives and to categorize all of life into one of these 4 categories: work, rest, prayer, community. Meaningful life involves all 4 categories in equal measure. I was convicted by the reminder that working to the point of exhaustion and weariness and then collapsing into bed at night is not meaningful, intentional living. Good, meaningful, fulfilling life includes work, rest, prayer, and community. After reading the first chapter, I spent some time looking at my life, attempting to place all the things I do neatly into these 4 categories. But most things stretch between categories. A nap or a good night of sleep or curling up in front of the fire with a good book, those are all obviously rest. But I am learning that I also need to create something every day, and that creativity is restful for me. Now, I can't write a score of music or paint a beautiful landscape, but I do love to set a pretty table, arrange a bouquet of flowers, or bake a loaf of bread. Community defines the time I invest in relationships with my little family of 3, relationships with friends, the Trinity family, the larger community. Most of these relationships are life-giving, but some of these relationships are tricky and challenging and therefore need to be placed in the work category because they often drain me. Some household chores like preparing dinner or folding laundry could certainly be labeled work, but for me, those activities easily morph into prayer. Preparing a meal for my family and people I love is prayerful, a time for me to hold them close to my heart and also close in God's heart. I rarely fold laundry. Mark almost always does that. But when I do, folding each garment becomes a prayer for the person who will be wearing it. Much of my work as a pastor is meaningful and fulfilling and doesn't feel like work, but more like community, more like prayer. My morning prayer time, which obviously fits into the prayer category, is also the most restful time of my day. Spending time with people dear to me fits into the community category, but some of those times are so life-giving, feel so holy and sacred, that they also become prayer. This book is helping me to see that we have only a certain amount of strength, a finite number of hours in the day, just these 2 hands. How shall we use our strength, our time, our two hands? I'm trying to be more intentional, more mindful about the choices I make, about how I am using my time, how I am living my life. I am also aware that Benedict's rule for life does not include time for self-doubt or negative thoughts or fear or worry. So maybe those things need to be minimized in my life. I think the rule of Saint Benedict is trying to teach us that when we are mindful, intentional, and focused, then all of life, the work, the rest, the relationships, all of it becomes prayer. As Robert Benson notes, I am not called to live the life of a monk. I am called to live a life that becomes the gospel. I long to be the sort of person who brings honor and glory to the kingdom of God by the way I live my life. God calls each of us to live a life that becomes the gospel. This book is helping me through baby steps of progress to change my life from working without stopping to praying without ceasing.